Arratsaldeon eta eskerrik asko hemen egoteagatik. Parece que va a ser una jornada muy, muy íntima, así que gracias por venir. Se celebran un montón de eventos a la vez hoy en la ciudad de Bilbao. Tengo el placer de introduciros a 3 personas que están aquí conmigo y a otras 2 que están en el público para explicaros un poco lo que ha ocurrido hoy aquí en el centro y lo que va a ocurrir durante estos 2 días. Estamos celebrando un laboratorio de cultura digital y casi 20 colectivos y artistas están formando parte de este laboratorio sobre las identidades culturales. Dentro de nuestro proyecto programa que presentamos hace ya, a inicio de año con la nueva dirección de Fernando Pérez, que acaba de cumplir un año, se definen 5 líneas principales. Una es el arte contemporáneo, otras son las artes en vivo, otra es la cultura digital, la literatura y la sociedad. Dentro de la cultura digital es donde enmarcaríamos este laboratorio que estamos haciendo muy relacionado con la mediación y con la educación. Y pues para investigar dentro de las identidades desde el punto de vista siempre artístico, ¿no? Después de este laboratorio elegiremos 10 proyectos que tendrán un mentoring y una residencia online, que podremos también conocer más adelante dentro de unos cuantos meses quiénes serán los elegidos y qué proyectos y cómo los han trabajado. I was just saying in Spanish that we are organized a Digital Culture International Lab and a symposium together with Digital Identities team. Thank you. We are really happy to have them with us, and I hope you feel comfortable and take the chance to make any question you may have. I leave you with these 3 big experts, and 2 of them are in the audience with us too. Abdai Adkari, Sarah Gillette, Sarna Jackson, Tom Ayam, and Corey Moore. Welcome to the Symposium of Culture Lab, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Raquel. Do I need a microphone? Do you need me to speak in the mic because you're recording? Or, yeah? Fine. Okay, absolutely. So thank you very much, all of you. There's 3 of us here on the stage. I'm Sarah Gillette, I'm an artist. This is Shana Jackson, Artistic Director of Sight Gallery in Sheffield in England. And this is Tom Hyam, who is Artistic Director of York Mediali, which is a festival for media arts. And what we thought we'd do is, first of all, we're going to introduce ourselves, kind of 5-minute introductions, and then we're going to have a conversation about, between the 3 of us, what would we really want from each other in terms of our own careers, our own position in the cultural ecosystem. How does an artist, an organisation and a festival potentially work together, cross over with each other? And where are the missing links where we need to bring in other people? So we're going to have a conversation around that. And we also want to offer you the opportunity to ask us questions about our work, what we're doing, questions that you have about your own creative practice, whether you're an artist, a producer, a curator, whoever you are, someone that's interested in what we're doing today. So I'm going to start because I've got one of the 2 microphones. So my name's Sarah. I'm an artist. I'm not a digital artist, but I'm an artist who works with storytelling. So all of my work is really about building fables across space and time. And I'm someone that really, I feel quite out of place a lot in today's world. I often feel like I'm sort of slightly out of time, that I should be somewhere else, that I should be living at another time. And partly because of that, I collect objects and things that I keep around me in my home. So I have a collection of fossils and Gothic ornaments and paperweights and strange curiosities that I keep around me and use as inspiration for my work. And from that perspective, I start my practice, and my practice is all about exploring histories of belief and storytelling and ritual and the ways that people interact with each other, with the objects around them, and particularly with landscape. Because a lot of my work is about how stories come from a particular place and a particular time. So I'm from a part of England that's in the moors. It's in the north of England. It's not as beautiful and extreme and rugged as the landscape around Bilbao, but it certainly has a tradition of romantic literature, of people responding to the landscape creatively in a way that brings us stories about witches, about ghouls that live on the moors, about people going missing on long walks. And all of that is woven in, I feel, to the landscape itself and into the place that I was brought up as a child and the kind of stories that I heard. And then when you move to a city, you get completely different stories. And actually, when we come to Shana has a story about the city, and a different kind of story that you're telling in some of your work as a writer, because Shana is also a writer. So I really believe that we carry these stories with us, and that's where my kind of work comes from. But as someone who makes work, and I make drawings, and I make etchings, and I make installations, and I make kind of performance works, how do I interact with then the digital world that's happening at the same time, which is another space for the imagination? It's another space that we go into and is sometimes a reflection, a strange reflection of what's happening in the outside physical world, and is sometimes a completely different space that doesn't come into the daily life at all. And I've become quite interested in that. So one piece of work that I'm making at the moment is, and some of the people that are here heard me talk about this earlier, is last year I did some internet dating. It was all the things that I thought it was going to be, which is bad. And for some reason, I kept being matched with men who were stroking tigers. And I didn't know what was happening here. But this world of these men stroking these tigers is quite, actually, in my head, is quite a magical world where we can interact with these amazing animals in this way that in real life, we don't ever at all. But really underlying that is quite a dark mythology as well, because in order to stroke a lion or a tiger, they've obviously got to be in captivity. They've got to be drugged in some way, because otherwise that interaction would never happen. So what at first in the digital world is being presented to me as an aspirational space of someone going and traveling across the world and having these amazing experiences, in my work becomes something quite dark, because that person is then asking me to date them, which I didn't. I didn't go on any dates with any of the tiger-stroking men, I have to say, So there's different ways that I have started to interact with what's happening in the digital world and in my own world, and how these different parts of it fit together. And I'm going to leave my part of it there, and ask Shana to now talk about what you do.
Yeah, what I'm about. Okay, so I'm Shana Jackson, and I am the artistic director at Sight Gallery. And Sight Gallery is a newly expanded but still very small compared to your space gallery in the north of England. I'm also, as Sarah mentioned, a writer, and I write children's books. And the book that was released in April is very much about cities. about London. And unlike Sarah, I'm really glad that I live in these times. I love digital. I love being on the internet. I love it. Yes, there's a dark side to it, but there is so many positives to be able to be connected with so many people too. So I'm fully glad that I'm here. So yeah, we moved into our new space. We have 12 staff, so it's a small organisation. We have 3 seasons a year, and the middle season in the summer is something that we internally call, excuse me, partnership season. So we work with local festivals and partners to bring in new audiences. And our remit at Sight Gallery is new media, moving image and performance. So digital is inherent in everything that we do. And my job, as I'm new, I started about 10 months ago, is to really, or I think my job is to really hone into what that means and making sure that digital is not VR headsets for 2 weeks. It's, okay, how do we communicate and how do we use digital as a tool to bring in new audiences or lapsed audiences? So the gallery has reopened in September after a period of expansion. So it was closed for 2 years. So it was really interesting to think about what and who a gallery is during a period of closure. So a lot of work that we did was via a van. We had a van that went out into different communities, and there was a lot of social media and posting in that time. But I think that's, yeah, what it means to have a physical space in the digital era is really interesting. Art and artists are absolutely at the heart of what we do, and my background is trying to bring new audiences to participate into arts and culture. So people who are afraid to come into cultural spaces because they feel intimidated. My work is about working with them to get them over the threshold. So for me, while art and artists are obviously core to what we do, so is audience. So how do I use digital to make them feel comfortable coming to us? And it's a task. It's a hard task because there's more to it than that. It's more than making them like us on Instagram. It's like, it's a bigger question. How do people who aren't engaged with culture interested, how do we do that? And it's not something that Sight Gallery on its own can do. But yeah, we have 3 seasons, and the partnership season is particularly interesting, and we'll unpack that, I guess, when we speak with Tom about how we work with festivals and what we hope to achieve from it. Hi. I'm putting it here. Take this one. I was at Tate Gallery for many years. I was at Tate for about 8 years. And I'm finding it really interesting now not to have a collection and be working with contemporary artists. And I didn't, I guess, understand how different it would be, because collections are easier because you just pick what you like and you put it on display and you take it off and you can say what you like about it. You can tweet whatever you want about it. I mean, within reason, you have to be respectful to the art and the artists. But working now with contemporary artists, and it sounds really cold, but taking their feelings into account is a very different situation to be in. And so navigating what it means to be digital with artists is a really interesting conundrum for me, I guess, as someone who is potentially quite naive. Yeah. So, yeah, sorry. That was a great wrap up of my... So, yeah. Tom.
Thank you, Shana. So, hi everybody, my name's Tom. I'm the creative director of a media arts biennial festival called York Mediale. It's only happened once, so it's quite new, but I still say that, so it still exists and will be happening again. So I think I'm just going to very quickly outline kind of how I make projects happen. I've got some slides because I'm boring like that, and it takes the pressure off me and stops you looking at me. For me, there are 3, in my experience anyway, there are 3 factors in making ambitious or impactful digital artworks that are crucial, and maybe more broadly in all kinds of cultural commissioning projects. So time, people, and risk. And what we've been doing in York is an interesting example relating to Bilbao, because it's a historic city that's full of beautiful heritage organisations and buildings. It's gorgeous. It's a kind of open-air museum. But culturally, it's a little bit dull. And so it's a very tourist-dominated city. It doesn't have a huge amount of youth vibrancy, and it pushes away young, talented, creative people to bigger cities just down the road, like Leeds and Manchester and Newcastle and London. So the festival was founded with the fully intending to try and shift that and try and slowly but surely create a space for a slightly more creatively dynamic city. So I've got a short video of the festival that most of you have seen, so I'll skip past that video. Just very quickly, in terms of the way I've always worked, and the biggest organisation I've ever worked for is Manchester International Festival, which is a commissioning festival in the UK. It's about to happen in July this year. If you have some spare money to fly to Manchester and a holiday, go. It's incredible. Huge artists from Bjork to Yoko Ono to Idris Elba to all sorts of crazy, massive commissions. So that's the other end of festivals, but it's not the end that I know usually. The end that I know usually is raise as much money as we can from international partners, from national funders, and then take that little bit of money to people like Shana and say, Shana, what are you interested in? And then have a conversation, hoping that Shana says something, or that I can plant a seed in Shana's mind, which is something that I'm interested in as well. And then we co-commission with institutions. So that's the way to make a festival of scale and impact by collaborating and co-commissioning by default. So these were some of the partners for the first festival, quite a lot, as you can see, and it will be bigger next time. So skip past that video if I can. Okay, so from my perspective, we're not an institution, we're quite a new festival commissioning organisation. I think in the UK we are extremely lucky in the arts. I think we all moan in every context in every country, and we all have complaints about the funding situation and the audience situation, and we travel to places and go, oh, it's way better there, and we don't know the detail. But still, digital creative practice, or digital art, as I would name it, is still not quite authentic. It's not quite trusted by the mainstream institutions. So I think probably all of us in this room are the exception rather than the rule in terms of the reception that this kind of practice can get in mainstream visual art and contemporary art institutions. So just put that out there. But I think we have an opportunity and a chance to push forward really ambitious projects, which is what I've spent my career trying to do and will continue to do, by being able to put on different hats and put on a suit when required and dance a certain way when required, to talk in the language of technology, of contemporary art, of heritage, of civic development, of innovation, to be able to articulate the value and the impact of the arts to those sectors. I think we're uniquely positioned, personally, to be able to do that. And so that's how I try and source funding support and time and people and receptiveness to risk in the projects that we do. Just quickly then, the three sort of factors that come out of every production that we work on. Collaboration by default. So collaboration I take as a word like digital. It annoys me when funders say, it'd be interesting if you could talk about being collaborative. And I just don't know any other way. Like, I don't see it's possible to make projects without collaborating and being open, because I've never been lucky enough to have 100% of the budget and nobody I need to work with to develop a project. Also, the alchemy of this art form, the art form that I work in particularly, where you can perhaps carefully and with some risk place a sculptor with a filmmaker or a musician with an engineer and see what are the edges of their practice and how could that create something really exciting. There are many examples of that failing, yes, but there are also many examples of work that couldn't otherwise have happened without a risk-taking, quite brave but also quite dynamic commissioning organisation, and that plays into risk as well. All of it, though, none of it matters if you don't invest in the people, and that's the artists, the staff, the audiences. And I'm sure you guys have your frustrations in the Spanish kind of funding ecosystem around this, but certainly in the UK, it's very easy to invest in safe bets and the Tate or the Whitechapel or a major technology project with lots of equipment, but actually what's really impactful is investing in the right people at the right time. So very, very quickly, just to show you a few projects that I think embody what I'm talking about. So this is a project 4 years old now. It's made by a coder, so a computer programmer who is become a really prominent media artist. And this project was a live performance on the opening night of our festival in front of a sold-out 700-person audience where the coder was a composer. So it was stunning. He worked with the BBC Philharmonic Orchestra, and we took a lot of risks in that project, and it's kind of fun to be able to take risks. Some don't. I'm not going to show you the ones that don't work, of course, but some really work. Light Barrier by Kimchi and Chips is another one. So this is a project internationally. You may have seen it. It's won a few awards, Ars Electronica, things like that. So this project took from 2011 to 2014 to develop, and it involved funding and support from 4 different countries and about 8 different institutions over the time it took to make. And it was kind of blind faith in the right artist at the right time with the right idea that caused that project to build and develop. This version that the image is of there is the first version, and it was in a forest in Russia, 4 hours outside Moscow. It was amazing, like incredible project to be able to do. I've never been stung by so many mosquitoes in all my life. But it just goes to show that, like, I think I'm personally in a really lucky position where able to source funding and a salary and some artist commissioning money and production money to be able to take these kind of crazy risks. This went and then has gone on to become a much, much bigger project in the last couple of years. Activism. So this is a quick one, which was basically a performance and a video work that we presented in the festival last year by a Saudi Arabian artist who working with the kind of frustration and problematic nature of borders and immigration policies internationally. So really politically, independently challenging work. I think it's nice to be able to carve out the space to show those things and create those things as a festival. I've got some upcoming projects that we can come to, but things like the future of screen-based storytelling, major immersive installations involving lasers and water. I'll talk about that later. And all this leads to, in York, as an example, I'm just trying to speed up through it. There's a major redevelopment in our city, a part of the city that's being redeveloped. And I know somebody from the lab today was talking about gentrification and kind of city development. We, through developing these outrageously ambitious, scary projects, are now right in the middle of how this part of the city is developed as an independent arts organisation with 6 staff and some really kind of quite crazy ideas involving technology and politics. So it can really work, and it can really shift the kind of the boundaries of the city. And it also, this has resulted in us securing quite a lot of funding for our next festival, because they trust that they perhaps actually need the perspective from the artists and the arts organisations that they don't otherwise have in the architects and the development programmes associated. So there's a value in this kind of work. I know I'm speaking to the converted, but eternal return, I'll come back to that. It's a VR project. I'm not quite sure about it, but that's me.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So there's our little introductions to our different ways in. And now we're going to ask each other some questions. And I'm going to start because, you know, as an artist, one of the things is like, well, okay, I'm making this work. Like, who do I work with? How do I get it out there? How do I further the work in terms of collaboration? And finding the right people to work with. So I'm going to ask Shana, as an organisation, what are you looking for from an artist?
Wow, that's a big question, isn't it?
That's what I want to know.
Okay. So Site Gallery, we really like to work with emerging artists, so artists who are quite new to the field. And in the past, we've been called a runway gallery because many of our artists have gone on to great things, including winning the Turner Prize and other accolades. So we are, I mean, it depends on the institution, but we like to work with people at an early-ish stage and people who are really open to new commissions and ideas. And I guess I was writing some notes down, and we, you know, art and artists is core to our mission, and I guess we're constantly in the era of digital, like redefining what the work is. So before, when you might deliver some work or work with our curator to complete an exhibition and have the exhibition and maybe work on the publication, I think now there is an underlying stream of additional work, which is the digital. And that can take many different forms. And I think for us, we are looking to work with artists who are open to being accessible. So that takes two forms. So I'm really into participation and making sure that artists feel comfortable within our team. So we're working with an artist at the moment called Phoebe Davis. And she comes in and she sits with the team and she talks about her process. And so we're all bought into it. So it's because we're small enough for that to be able to happen. And she understands that, you know, we are not going to exploit her on the internet. That's not our intention. But we obviously want to talk about the show and her work. So we have to negotiate what that means and at what stage we're starting to talk about our collaboration. For me, this is digital adjacent, but really interested in working with artists who are keen to work with audiences. And I don't mean necessarily going out and running a workshop directly, but thinking about how we can make those new audiences come into the gallery, how they can make it accessible. And understanding that for us, that digital is not something that we've just tacked on to our work, but something that we hope runs through the entire experience of working with us. And yeah, that's what we'd be looking for. And obviously our remit is new media, moving image and performance, but I don't just mean, oh yes, it's on a VR headset. Oh yes, well that's on a screen. Yes, I'll take it. But yeah, thinking about what digital means in its current context and using that as a starting point. So we would absolutely work with you with your tiger, dating tigers.
You heard it first here.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask me something or do you want to ask Tom something?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, so what are your expectations for when you work with a gallery?
I think my expectations of working with a gallery, I think I would kind of come back a step, because with a lot of my work, it involves a collaboration right at the beginning of an idea. So, for instance, at the moment, I'm developing a project where I've put a call out for fishermen, people that go and fish for salmon and trout, so particularly fly fishing, because I want to learn how to make flies. And this is to lead to a project where I want to make a fly that would catch an asteroid. Okay, so I'm also talking to the Natural History Museum and their meteorite department about what qualities would you need to have in order to attract an asteroid. So I've got already two groups of people. I've got people who are going out fishing, and I've got people that are going out looking for meteorites and are analysing meteorites from space, so rocks from space. And so with a gallery, I guess I would be saying, is there something, because it's about your expertise in a particular area. So what would a project look like that was about exploring your expertise and developing an idea and the work from that? Because in a way, I think just treating a gallery or an organisation as an organisation is too reductive nowadays. It's much more about, for me, meeting people, having these conversations, and out of that going, oh, there's something really interesting in a dynamic here that's happening, and then sort of working together. So I suppose I'm always looking for a kind of collaborator, a kind of creative collaborator on something. And what the gallery context brings is an authority to the work that is produced, and potentially something that enables different groups of people than people I might bring in. So it's this kind of bringing together of people at different stages in the making of the work. It's the most interesting part to me.
So with digital in mind, taking your project, and it seems like you're having really interesting conversations with both fishermen and astrophysics.
Yeah.
So for a gallery, if we were working with you, would you be comfortable with us perhaps recording that conversation and putting that on social media? Or do you feel that that is an intrusion into your practice?
No, I don't at all. But actually, it's an interesting question, because I record all the conversations that I'm having with people, because often snippets of those conversations come into the work. If I'm making a performance piece, that piece may include then these snippets of conversations by a disembodied voice that's speaking, or images, or some film of a conversation that I've had with someone. And really the challenge for me in it is sometimes it's quite hard to get people in the first place to agree to that, not from my perspective as the artist, but actually from the perspective of the collaborator, because this is also a very strange space for them to be operating in. Because, already I've gone and said, hi, I'm an artist. You're going fishing. Can I come with you? And they're like, huh? What, I don't understand. I don't know who you are. So I have to build up the trust, and then I have to be in a position to say, I'm making this piece of work. Can I record what we're saying? It's not any kind of trick, all of that. But everyone is so aware now of kind of surveillance, of being recorded, of is this going to be used in some way against me? That actually part of my work is getting people to understand that this is a celebration of something. I don't approach any of my work ironically. Yeah.
Do you feel that in the digital era where there is now, I've just asked you, would you be happy with us to display some of that process? Do you feel that now you're under pressure to present work before you're ready? And maybe has digital have had that effect where you're like, okay, well, now the process is part of the work?
Yeah, definitely. I think that quite often, unintentionally as well, people will share something, we'll share kind of a drawing that I'm making, and I'll get a text from somebody saying, oh, I just told this person about that series that you're making. And I'm a bit like, well, I haven't actually presented that series yet, and it's still in process. And also, that's kind of my idea, and you just going and telling other people about it, I also feel a little bit vulnerable about,
But if it's online, then do you have any ownership over it anymore?
Well, no, that's the thing, isn't it? Once it's there, it's there. Which is why, the point about when you share something, I think, is really important, and how that is managed. Unless the whole point of the work is that it's all there right from the beginning, and then I think that's about putting those parameters in terms of your digital practice and what you're comfortable with from every side, everybody that's involved. So everybody understands right from the beginning, this is going to go online at this stage on these channels. We're going to be talking about it in this way. Yeah. But for me, I mean, you know, my thing is storytelling. So I think part of it is the story changes as you go along, and actually looking back and seeing what the story was at the beginning that you're putting out and what it was at the end is also a really interesting thing to see. And having that insight into somebody's practice is something really valuable that we often don't get to see. So I think it can be a really good thing too.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. I don't like saying democratizing because it's not that, but having insight into the process really helps me from a participation perspective, because it demystifies some of the creation around artwork, and you can show young people and disengaged people that it's not necessarily, while it is obviously an alchemy and it's brilliant, but there is some practical things that go into the making and creation of an artwork, and it's just not something that is, you know, conceptualized on day one and made on day two. So I really enjoy the digital process.
I think just to add to that, I talked a bit today about processing, which is a open source programming language that is used to make a lot of digital artwork. And I worked on a project with Memo, and we taught a group of 8 to 12-year-olds, and it was an interactive theatre project, and we made a piece of interactive theatre, and they made all of the interactions. They made them in processing. And one of the artists that working on the project teaches an MA or an MSc in digital media creativity, basically. So he teaches a module on processing to 21-year-old master's students with qualifications and skills. And it takes him a whole term, so like 3 months, to get them to a level with processing. And these 10-year-olds picked up processing in about 2 hours, and they were getting to the level that the 21-year-olds were at like a couple of months into the program. So it's really easy to kind of go, oh, you can't, when you wave your hand and that thing flashes across the screen, you can't have access to making that. You really can. And a lot of these artists are very open in sharing the skills required. But I just wanted to ask Sarah another question about, or kind of a flip question of, what role do festivals play? So as an artist, an individual artist, I guess it's maybe overly simplified to say you see kind of cultural institutions and venues and organisations like Shana's, like Site Gallery, or like Ascuna as one source of commissions and shows. But then festivals are quite regular and common. How do they differ, and what do they not do right? What could we do better?
I mean, I think like one of the brilliant things about festivals is it is that democratized space often, and quite often things are happening that are not in a gallery or a kind of institution where people have to kind of walk through a door and they have a particular expectation of what they're going to see. So, you know, that idea of kind of taking over a shop or doing something on a street corner or in a car park, or, you know, in a bar, and it's only at that moment that that thing is happening and you're there or you're not there, is really attractive to me, because it's a whole different set of people that potentially will see that and interact with it and have a very, very different engagement than the formal sort of gallery kind of engagement. I think where it's really difficult for an artist to work with a festival is, I suppose, what you were saying earlier about, you know, you obviously have to look for partners to work with you on commissioning. And the difficult thing, you know, as an individual artist, is saying, well, where is my space that I can come directly to a festival and propose something? And how can I be heard in, you know, in the noise of the festival, where there's all these amazing things happening over just maybe a few days or a week, you know, which is quite a long time for a festival, a week. How long is Mediali?
It was 10 days, but
Yeah.
that was too long.
Yeah,
But yeah.
because that's a long time for a festival, and and there is kind of festival fatigue of sort of walking around, and when does something become kind of boring? And as an artist, it's like, okay, how do I get seen? How do I get seen? I can literally have a space, but actually, how do I talk about what I'm doing in the context of potentially quite disparate work?
Yeah, and I think maybe there's I would like to think there's a solution here that kind of links Sarah and Shana together, in the sense that perhaps a festival, and question for you, Shana, perhaps a festival is an opportunity for an institution to reach out with a context and with some risk reduced, because there's half the money's being put in by the festival, to challenge that. The thing about thresholds and people who are scared to cross the threshold is so huge, and I'm sure you guys suffer from it in this institution, but they're so intimidating, these cultural landmarks. They're so aggressively do not come in, and just in their ambience, in their architecture. I used to work in Newcastle as a quick example of this, and there's the Sage Gateshead, which is in Gateshead, not in Newcastle. It looks like a big slug. It's a huge, amazing piece of architecture, but it's a fortress, right? And it's built in Gateshead, which is a different city or borough than Newcastle. So all the money came from taxpayers in Gateshead. Nobody from Gateshead crosses its threshold. All the wealthy upper middle class people from Newcastle use it. Everybody from Gateshead is terrified of it because it's so intimidating. But maybe a festival and a different angle is an opportunity for. Is that an opportunity for SITE to do things differently in different ways and try stuff? Or?
It is, but it comes with consequences as well. Yeah. So in the partnership season that I mentioned, June, July, August, we work with 2 festivals and emerging artists. So in June, we'll be working with Sheffield Doc Festival, which is quite renowned for documentary films. But they also have a strand called Alternate Realities, which is about storytelling in new ways via new media. So they, in the past, have had a lot of VR headsets, to my chagrin, but they are now looking at mixed realities and installation, so it's interesting. So we're hosting them at SITE, and we also contributed £5,000 towards their digital commission, which was great for us to have our name included in international press releases and all the great things that come with a renowned international festival. And then in July, we worked with the Children's Media Conference, which was a business-to-business conference that happens for 2 days where people from Disney and Nickelodeon all come to Sheffield and talk. But I thought it was really weird that we'd have all these kids executive come to the city but not do anything for the children. So I started a exhibition 4 years ago, and now that's coming to SITE Gallery. And yeah, it's really interesting looking at festivals when you have your artistic director hat on, because the galleries are doing their business as usual, and festivals sometimes, in the case of Sheffield, like land on a city and then take it over and then it goes. And while it does bring in new audiences, it brings in international audiences who come for a day and then leave. But where we're finding is an issue is that local people still won't engage with DocFest because they feel like it's quite. That is just another. It's not contained intimidation; it's citywide intimidation. So people, when they come, they have these orange lanyards. And the locals are like, oh, it's orange lanyard, it's orange neck time. And then they stay away. So what I'm trying to do with DocFest is get them to extend their exhibition outside of their festival period. So it gives local people a chance to access the work. Because the festival is so frantic. I mean, it's just going to be packed. And that is just as intimidating. It's even more intimidating, I think, to see it rammed full of cosmopolitans. And they're like, well, where do I fit? So that's part of my strategy, is absolutely how do I extend it with them? So yeah, the democratization of space idea is like, yeah, it's a bit different from my perspective. And I guess my question is, I found it really interesting working with a festival because they work on completely different timelines to a gallery. So where we're trying to plan ahead, and I'm very proud of the fact that I'm programmed until 2021 and I've got plans. And look at me. The festival, you know, they're like, now, I need a logo. I've sent you a logo. I need it. And they will send you WhatsApp messages in 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, so someone from Sao Paulo's coming. It's like, you could tell me tomorrow. My question for you is, with digital communications and festivals, and not necessarily festivals and art galleries, but how do we communicate effectively when people are working on very different kind of time frames and different styles?
That's a good question. I think that from the festival side of that problem is the timelines are so different institution to institution. So if you're programmed to 2021, congratulations. But I know, for example, in Manchester, I used to run a festival in Manchester. A Manchester Art Gallery and the Whitworth Art Gallery is locked in its program for 5 years. So if you're an annual festival, you better be so secure and financially stable that you can afford to spend any time thinking about your festival in 6 editions from now. And then double that problem by, if you're a festival about contemporary digital culture, how the hell can you program a current, thrivingly exciting, responsive exhibition 6 or 7 years ahead of time? So it's a sort of mismatch of timelines that's really hard to break through. And I guess the best ways to... It's kind of give and take, isn't it? So in York, I know we've been able to secure at least the next 3 years of our existence, and we're near to 4. So that gives us 2 festivals. So I can start to be talking to people about 2022 autumn very soon, I hope, which is great because it means we can have proper collaboration conversations with the art galleries and the theatres. But it's rare that happens, particularly if you're annual. That's part of the reason we're a biennial festival, because doing it once a year means your production cycle is 8 months long. So you have to ring up Shana 7 months before the event and go, we want to do this thing and we need this space for this many days. And Shana says, well, it's been programmed for 2.5 years, I can't.
Oh, but see, that's why I've got this partnership season in the middle for that flexibility. Yeah. So the 2 shows around partnership season are fixed. But what we do is work with an emerging artist and then work with them to define what the show is. So there's still that kind of time for flexibility. But yeah, I hear you. But it's just really, it's really tricky to get my team to understand the festival mentality, because they all, so Site Gallery, for better or worse, at the moment, like, everybody loves our cafe probably more than our exhibitions. So the DocFest team are based next door, and they basically live in the cafe. So whenever we walk through, we're just pulled into meetings. I mean, I spend all my time, and I'm on their board as well. So like it's like a whole second job, and I love it, and I know it's going to end soon, so it's fine. But it's really interesting, like, how in terms of digital communication, how the lack of boundaries, I guess, between us and them, and the WhatsApping and the demands and the, I don't know, like, we would hope that they would have a Dropbox or something, and we could send the logos, but different people ask for our logos like 4 times a day, and it's just like, what the fuck? It's
challenging. Sometimes it comes down to a little bit of respect, of like of pushing back in order to demand the respect. I sometimes struggle with that in Manchester. I did, certainly. Like, you wouldn't speak to the Lowry like this, you know, because we're a small upstart entity. We get kind of like anything can be demanded at any time. So
Okay, we're going to stop moaning now. Any questions or thoughts that anybody has? I think we have to bring you the microphone. So, or maybe Abe can bring the microphone to anybody that might want to ask something. So, there's only a few of us. It's not scary. Not really. Anyone?
Help me fulfill my role.
Barbara.
Thank you. We feel very, thank you for your participation, because it was very interesting, at least for me, because I feel like we have also exhibitions, we have festivals, and it's a bit stressful sometimes, because you're always, they put you on pressure, because we need the logos, we need the funding, we need also all the artists' information. I mean, in the way of the contemporary formats. So how can we do that now, having a digital identity? So in this way of, we need to build the formats, the projects, the artist projects, and parallelly the communication department needs to build this digital, not only communication, but this also the digital identities. So we also do this process of interviews of with the artists, with the curators, etc. But it's true that sometimes they don't really want to, if they are in the process of working, they don't want to really to tell all their work, no. But how we can build this story? You were talking about how we build the storytelling. We are now in the process of building the new storytelling of Azkuna Central. But it's true that we are always the feeling of being in process. We are always in the process. Whereas Apai, he can see us always running. So sometimes it's okay. We perhaps need to stop and just to think about who we are, and we really to build properly the storytelling. But we are always producing. Are we perhaps overproducing? Because but also regarding the city of Bilbao, we have many cultural institutions. Today we have a big opening at the Guggenheim. There's always others openings in the city. We have a big festival of techno arts right now in another institution. So we are always producing. Are we doing right?
It's an interesting question in terms of the ecology and how I'm a big fan of the saying less is more, and I often say that to funders, and it sounds like an excuse to do less for the same funding, but I really think in the festival that I developed last autumn, there were too many projects, spread too thinly, too many venues, too many artists, tried too much. And I think that's an instinctive, people who work in the arts internationally, in Spain and in the UK, we have a kind of shame or responsibility to be able to stretch every single centimetre from every single euro that we can possibly fund in order to do as much as possible, when actually that might be at the expense of the quality and the impact of what we're trying to do. I think there's an interesting balance there that maybe comes down to marketing as well. In terms of the digital identity, there are many more expert storytellers in the room than me, but I always think it's fascinating that as a commissioner of artworks, I will often get some funding. Let's say it's 100 euros to do a project, and we will have planned to spend 60 euros on the project, 20 euros on the production of it, and 20 euros on the marketing of it. Very, very quickly, always happens, we'll say, but what about if we spent 65 euros on the project and only 15 on the marketing? And then what about if we spent 70 and only 10 on the marketing? And then suddenly you've spent all the money on making the work and none on telling anyone about it. So we have curators in arts institutions who curate shows and galleries and installations and festivals. But why do we not have curators of brands or storytellers of brands to be able to build a consistent narrative and identity? Why don't we value that as much as what's inside the gallery, maybe?
I was just picking up your point about content creation. And I think it is important to stop at regular times and take stock of what it is that you're doing, because you often get in the cycle of making because you're making, and that's what people do. We make stuff and we put things out, and we have to tweet, don't we? Tweeting, Instagram, don't we? Yeah, constant. And then you have to really think, okay, who is this for, and why are you making it, and is it reaching the people you're making it for? Otherwise, is it worth doing it? And when we were at Tate, when I was in the media department, and it used to be headed by somebody called Will Gompertz, who's now moved to the BBC. And his ambition was to be a media personality. So he created like a Tate channel on its own, in its own software. And this was what YouTube was around at this point in Vimeo. And we said, why don't we, if we're going to be investing in content or video content, we should put it where people can watch it, right? No, it's not, it's not what I want. He wanted this, branded channel elsewhere. But luckily, he left. So we got to make it, we got to repurpose that content and put it where it makes sense. I really think it is important just to not be in competition. Sometimes I think you look at, I don't know, I haven't really looked recently, but the MoMAs and these and this, and it's really glitzy and they've put lots of money in it, but it's not necessarily doing anything apart from making them feel good. So yeah, and in terms of all the activity that's happening in Bilbao, is there, I'm assuming there must be, but like a consortium for all the museums across the city where you will talk about what's coming up? So is there that kind of connectedness?
We are in touch with the rest of the institution, more with the museums or the cultural center, rather than perhaps with all the festivals, because there are so many festivals in Bilbao. But and many of them, for example, takes place here, for example, in Azkondo Centro. But yes, we try to coordinate with the calendar of the big, let's say, the big events during the year. But even though it's not very easy, but we try to really, yeah.
I know.
Any final questions before we all go? Yay!
I have a question for Tom, but I don't know, maybe you can also add from your perspective, because you were talking about like giving different examples of how you were developing the project of York Mediale. And one of the ideas that you emphasized while you were talking about fundraising, that when you are talking to the possible funders, you need to communicate the value of art and culture. That's the most important thing, like to persuade them. Do you have like any like specific, I know that it's quite a strange question maybe, but like specific strategies that you elaborate in your work or with your team, how you do this kind of thing, how you communicate this value of art and culture to possible funders, and how difficult is it in England? I mean, I don't know, maybe because here I think it's quite difficult. It depends on the strategy, and also, do you use any digital tools to elaborate those strategies?
That's a really good question, and it's really hard to answer because I think I would admit that I'm not the right-on artist who says you need to value and fund art for art's sake because art deserves support. I don't do that. I pretend, and so I try and speak the language of the funder that I'm talking to. So in York, the first conversations when I started were all about the economic value of the creative and digital sectors. So I used statistics, I used economic reports and established data that they trust and would read in the Financial Times or the Telegraph, actually for most of them, Tories, about the value and scale of the creative sector in the UK, which is huge and growing, and not everybody understands that. And I think so articulating that it's no longer a debate that investing in art and culture works. If you're a city or a university or an institution, it is proven the world over that it makes financial sense for the development of your city for many reasons. So I start with that, and then try and catch, and it's individual, isn't it? It's a sales job in a way. Try and catch what motivates people, what lights them up, what makes them passionate. Is it the opportunities for young people in the city? Is it creating jobs? Is it doing kind of big internationally recognizable things? What's the motivation? And I had, in the first festival, I had maybe 6 kind of core funders, ranging all the way from, all their expectations were different. One of them kept saying to me, what are you going to do for 13-year-olds in my bit of the city who have learning difficulties in the festival program? And I had an answer for that. And another, all the way through to, please can you book Kraftwerk or Beyonce and put her on the race course and have a big show with lights that I can take my friends to. That's the range of expectations that we had to deal with. We did need, we kind of did a bit of both. We didn't book Beyonce, but hopefully next time. No. But it's a difficult thing to try and sort of play the game and talk the language of the person you're talking to. I know that's a really general answer, but being able to speak those different economic languages and the social languages and the educational kind of, you can articulate the value of what you're doing in those different ways, which is something we talked about today. So,
and there's lots of stats as well in the UK around people's motivations as to why they engage with a cultural experience. And I think understanding motivations is really, really crucial in terms of talking to funders or talking to anyone really about artistic practice. So there's lots of stats about, you know, why do people visit a museum? What are people's motivations for visiting a museum website? And they're quite different often to people visiting a physical event. So looking at things like that, what are people's motivations for accessing digital art online as opposed to in person? And that can be about all sorts of different reasons. But understanding that really helps, because actually Shana was talking about collections earlier, and collections are a really crucial part of actually the landscape in its entirety, because MoMA and Tate and the Science Museum Group found in a big piece of research that the #1 attraction online for museums was a collection. So people were coming to explore a collection online from lots of different perspectives, but that enables a whole set of opportunities to be built around that collection, and a whole set of different artistic interactions and new projects around it. So, you know, when Shana was saying about the collection, it's this really easy win around, you've got this like receptacle of stuff to do something with. But potentially knowing those assets that your city has from different institutions really means that you can actually go, well, what's our core set of assets as a city, and how then do we use those more strategically? Because if we understand what people are looking for, then that means that we can say to funders, well, we've got all this knowledge and research behind us. I think you know, you have to back up an argument for funders with the economic value, with the statistics around visitor numbers, with all that other stuff that's not about the work necessarily.
Your idea will change and change and it'll become nothing. And I hate because that's literally the attention span of someone in a large multinational. So that is great. That's how I think as well, but you need a slide.
No. I was just going to say, yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think to Tom's point, it's about talking the language. And I used to feel quite like wrong, but then I've got a team of people that need jobs, so I have to do it, and I'm happy to do so.
Okay, so I think our time is up. We're here hanging around, so if you do want to come and grab us for a minute after, please do. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming. Thank you to Barbara, to Raquel, and to the Centre for hosting us. We will see our participants in the Culture Lab tomorrow morning. And for the rest of you, thank you very, very much for spending the hour with us. Thank you.